Hi there, my name's Simon from CramTheExam.com and welcome to another walkthrough video for another English exam question. I'll be telling you what the answers are and I'll be explaining why the answers are the answers, looking at all of the vocabulary links, contextual links that show, in my opinion, why the answers are the answers. And if you chose the wrong answer, hopefully by listening to my explanations, you'll be able to see perhaps where you went wrong and avoid making those same mistakes in the future. Okay, so we're going to have a look at a CAE, a Use of English Part 7 question. This is the third reading question, and it's the one where you've got to choose the correct paragraph to go in the correct place to finish off the reading or to complete the reading. This exam question you'll find on the excellent website examenglish.com, and you'll find the link to this exam question and the website in the video description below. I really recommend examenglish.com. Lots of wonderful resources, not just for the CAE but FCE and other English exams as well, so make sure that you check it out. Okay, so about this question, ideally you'd want to do this question as quickly as you possibly can. I would say around about 14 to 15 minutes would be a good time to do this reading question. If you divide up the time equally, then it does give you about 16 or 17 minutes to do this. But if you can do this in 13 or 14 minutes, then you give yourself some time for the other questions, notably the Part 6 reading question, which is a bit of a nightmare, or indeed the Part 4 question, the Use of English keyword transformation. It's not the keyword transformation, is it? The keyword transformation exercise, which also might take you a few extra minutes. So wherever you can save a few extra minutes, then work hard on doing the easier questions as quickly as possible to give yourself that extra time. As I said, you're looking for vocabulary and contextual links, and what I'm going to do now is go through this exercise to show you how you might think of what the answer is even before you have a look at the answers. So the first thing that you have to, that I would recommend that you do, not that you have to do because different sources say different things, but the first thing I would do would be to read through the article with the gaps to get a good idea of what's going on. Find out what the context is, find out who's involved, find out what's going on, find out as much as you can, and see if you can summarize the paragraphs that you've got into general ideas. So the article is about renovating the Lim water tower, and it talks about a couple's story in terms of finding the water tower and then creating it their home, and then the process of how that happened. So we've got an introductory paragraph to begin with, and then the next paragraph is, it talks about the structure as a dilapidated structure. So in other words, a structure in bad condition, and they wanted at this point to make it into a house of some kind. And then you've got this bit here, Julian has arrived into the scene. We don't know who Julian is right now, but he comes up with a master plan. So it could be the case that he's an architect, designer of some kind, and then you've got the idea of what this house would look like. Now you've got a conversation about work on the tower of some kind. Then you've got a little paragraph about money and what they had to do in order to get the project to completion. And now we're actually talking about the building itself. So it's as if the building is completed by now, that there's that it looks wonderful, it's beautiful, it fulfills their dreams, so to say. And then lastly, you've got a paragraph about money, final costs, and how much it's worth. Now, so if we go back to the beginning, then we might assume that between this paragraph and this paragraph, it says, first of all, finding themselves the owners of the dilapidated structure. So we've identified that important piece of vocabulary as we're reading through. So here they've bought. It introduces the fact that they might buy it, or they had ideas to buy it, and then this paragraph talks about them actually owning it. So something here is that missing bit between thinking about buying it or wanting to buying it and actually being the owner. And then we've got this conversation, as I said, about what they want to do with the building, and now Julian has suddenly appeared. So maybe in this missing paragraph there'll be talk of Julian, there'll be some kind of conversation about their planning or the process of the planning and how they got to Julian. And then we've got this bit here about daytime rays, and then work also had to be done. So it looks as if we've moved from the planning stage onto the building stage. So this bit in the middle could be something to do with building the house or work actually starting. Then we've got talk about the building, as I said, and then the conversation moves on to money. So you would think about maybe... and it says here, thankfully they were able to reclaim something towards these costs. So the idea is that there's a problem with money. So you might expect that this paragraph has got that discussion with money, problems to do with money, continuing work, something like that. And so for number 5, we've got here, they stopped taking family holidays. And then it says the extension, meanwhile, accommodates the main living space as a tribute to minimalism. So you've got lots of positive language here. As I said, it suggests that the building has been completed. Here, the building hasn't been completed yet. They're living somewhere else to complete the building. So you would expect that in this paragraph that there's something to do with the building being completed and finalization of the project. And then you've got this one here, as I said, it's something to do with a lot of positive language about what it looks like. And then you've got the conversation about how much it costs and concluding comments. So what could this be? This could be some more, perhaps, about what the building looks like, what the building's about. It could be some kind of discussion which looks at the pros and cons, pluses and negatives. This is a slightly wide open in terms of context. It could be about many, many different things. So here we're going to have to look at the answers carefully. So even though we haven't actually had a look at any of the answers yet, simply by reading through, identifying key pieces of vocabulary here and there, we get a good idea of the context, we know what the story is, we've got a good idea of what we might expect to see in these gaps. And I know that sounds like an awful lot for you to do. And of course, when you first start to do these questions, it will be really, really difficult, which is why you have to practice and practice and practice and practice and develop not just reading quickly, identifying vocabulary, but applying reason and logic and asking yourself, what's the context, what could be happening here, applying reasonable guesses towards, or educated guesses based on the context of what things might happen. So, and that's even before we have a look at the answers, and that's something you can practice and you can develop that skill. So, with all of that being said, let's have a look at our answers and see how close we were. So, the answer to number 1 is A, and this paragraph talks about the fact that Russell and his wife lived in an area in which the tower stood. He regularly walked around footpath to the tower. So this talks about the reasons, or perhaps gives us a little bit more background context between Russell, his wife, and the reasons for building for buying the tower. And we've got a number of vocabulary links here. First of all, we've got a derelict water tower, which links to crumbling 130-year-old water tower, and that links then to dilapidated structure. So certainly there's lots of vocabulary links about bad quality or the bad condition of the building. Then you've got what began as a whim. That links to impulsively put in a bid for 138,000. So the idea is that this was something done without a huge amount of planning, just because you wanted to. And whim, impulsively put in the bid, links to that. And of course, if you put in a bid, it means that you're taking part in an auction. If you take part in an auction and you win, then you become the owners of whatever it is that you've won. And that, of course, links straight to the beginning of the next paragraph. So here, there are clear vocabulary and context links to explain why A is the answer. For B, finding themselves the owner of the dilapidated structure, and this conversation was about what they wanted to do with it, and this is important, this last sentence, create something far more ambitious. And then G creates context, the fact that local other people had problems with their plans and they fought against them. So you've got opposition here. And then you've got this bit. We talked about Julian. Julian's mentioned here. Julian's master plan. Well, Julian's mentioned in G. So that's a good link straight away. And the fact that Julian drew up plans and his inspirational ideas, that links to master plan as well. And of course, so you've got vocabulary and context links there. And of course, kickstart their project means to actually go ahead and start building this. And we can see that this, in terms of activity, fits the context or the place in the context in the article very, very well. So we've got this paragraph describing Julian's plans, and then I said that there would be work that would have to be work also had to be done. So at this point, work had begun. Here it hadn't begun, and this paragraph C actually tells us that work begins. So contextually, it fits the gap. It fits the story very, very well. And then it goes on to describe the type of work that has to be done, and then that links to this. It says work also has to be done on something else. So we've got the discussion about work and activities that had to be completed. And D talks about the amount of companies that were involved, but the most important bit was there were problems at every stage. If something could go wrong, it would. Spirits plummeted and costs spiraled. Russell and Jeanette, could do little but look on as their savings dwindled. So here's that conversation about money, the fact that they're running out of money. And then that links straight away to they were able to reclaim something towards these costs from the income generated by the radio masks and by the television program. So that conversation of money is continued from D onto the next paragraph. Then I said, then I mentioned that contextually we're talking about building, they're running out of money, and then this paragraph seemed to suggest that the building has been finished. So we were looking for some kind of paragraph to suggest that the building had finally finished and started talking about the new building. And that's exactly what we've got here. But finally, it all paid off. The end result is both contemporary and luxurious. So our educated guess as regards story was correct. Here is the paragraph. We start talking about the building being finished and now the discussion of the completed building, which fits nicely into that gap there. And lastly, this I said was quite difficult. Difficult to guess because we were talking about the building still, what's inside the building in a very positive way. And then afterwards, there was a conversation about money and concluding remarks. So what could be in this gap? Well, we've got this paragraph here, which is a further discussion of the interior of the building. And as a matter of fact, we've got here, even the light switches and plug sockets are discreetly hidden. Light switches then goes on to, might link, bit of a tenuous link, you might argue, but nevertheless, light switches and colour and lighting, and so on, so on. So there is a link there, and certainly contextually in terms of further describing the interior of the building, this works. And certainly if we consider the other available option we have to us, which is E, talks about Russell and Jeanette just finished a 1920s farmhouse nearby, and what they had done to the farmhouse that they had just finished. So this paragraph, which is the only one that's left, if we were thinking about, is it going to be F, is it going to be E? Well, clearly it's not going to be E. If E had a place or was likely to have a place in this story, it would be at the beginning when it talked about the Russell and Jeanette's previous activities which they had done, which might have provided some kind of background as to why they bought this tower in the first place. Certainly contextually it doesn't fit into this part of the story which talks about the building being completed and how great the building is. Okay, that's why I think the answers are the answers. And you could see that a number of the answers were based on clear vocabulary links, and some of the answers were based on the contextual flow of the story. So that's why it's really, really important, I think, to read through this reading question first, identify what the context is, find out what's going on, identify the actors, and then begin to think and make educated guesses about what could be in these gaps. And then have a look at the answers, and then you should be able to fit in those answers a little bit easier. But let me know what you think. If you've got any plans or ideas about how you would do this, if they differ to mine, then leave a comment below. I'd be delighted to read them and get back to you. If you've got any questions at all, then please leave a comment below and I'll get back to you. Thank you very much for watching this video. If you haven't already, be sure to check out my website, CramTheExam.com, and I'll see you in another video soon.